Have you ever really tried to imagine a world without print? I mean, no books, no newspapers, no posters, not even labels on your food. It's almost impossible, right? We're so completely surrounded by the printed word, we forget that its arrival was the original information revolution, a real explosion that just completely reshaped human society. So let's explore how this incredible shift actually happened.
So on the left, you see a world that, we recognize. A chaotic, vibrant flood of information, available to pretty much everyone. But on the right, well, that's the world before. Knowledge being meticulously copied by hand, one single page at a time. It was slow, it was beautiful, and it was incredibly exclusive. This is the story of the leap from one of those worlds to the other.
So before this whole revolution, what was it actually like to get your hands on some information? The short answer is it was nearly impossible. For most people, knowledge was, in a lot of ways, kept under lock and key.
In pre-print Europe, books were basically rare treasures. We're talking about luxury items, things that could cost as much as a small farm. So access to information wasn't a right, not at all. It was a privilege, one that was reserved for the clergy, for royalty, and the super wealthy. For most people, the world of ideas was something you heard, not something you read. Now, it's really important to point out that the idea of printing wasn't entirely new. The earliest print technology was actually developed in East Asia. In places like China, Japan, and Korea, a system of hand printing using these carved wood blocks had been around for centuries, and it produced beautiful texts like this Diamond Sutra. But this method was a lot less efficient for languages that use alphabets, mainly because a whole new block had to be carved for every single page.
But back in Europe, the main way to make a book was the manuscript. And each one was a work of art, for sure, but they were also incredibly impractical. You see, copying them was this laborious, time-consuming business. A single book could take months, sometimes even years, to produce, and this system just couldn't keep up with the growing hunger for knowledge.
This growing demand, it basically set the stage for a breakthrough, a moment in history that would unleash a chain reaction that honestly we're still feeling today.
And enter Johann Gutenberg. This guy wasn't just a brilliant inventor. You could call him a master synthesizer. He took several technologies that already existed and just combined them in a completely new way. He saw the connections that nobody else did.
So, the crucial part is how he put it all together, right? He looked at a wine press and thought, hey, I can use that. He used his expertise as a goldsmith to create durable, uniform, reusable letters from metal, that's the movable type, and he perfected an oil-based ink that would actually stick to that metal. It was the combination that was pure genius.
And this picture, it shows the result perfectly. The quiet, solitary room of the scribe was replaced by, well, this, a bustling, noisy workshop. You've got compositors setting the type, pressmen pulling the levers, proofreaders checking everything. This wasn't just crafting a book anymore. This was manufacturing knowledge on an almost industrial scale.
The impact was immediate and just staggering. In the first 50 years after Gutenberg's press, we're talking 1450 to 1500, about 20 million books were printed in Europe. 20 million. That is more books than had been produced by hand in the entire previous 1,000 years.
But that was just the beginning. In the next century, that number exploded tenfold, all the way up to 200 million. The information Big Bang was underway, and it was expanding exponentially.
So with this flood of new information came a flood of new ideas. And once an idea was in print, it could spread like wildfire, for better and sometimes for worse. It was a power that was both celebrated and deeply feared. You know, maybe no one understood this power better than the religious reformer Martin Luther. When he wrote his 95 Theses challenging the Catholic Church, print carried his message all across Germany in a matter of weeks. He saw the press as a divine tool, a way to spread his ideas, and it absolutely fueled the Protestant Reformation, a movement that split Western Christianity forever.
But for every person like Luther who saw the press as a gift from God, there were others who saw it as a tool of the devil. And what's so interesting about this image here is how it visualizes that fear. You have skeletons representing death and chaos, literally taking over the print shop, dictating what gets produced. It's a powerful symbol of the anxiety that this new technology would unleash uncontrollable, dangerous ideas on the world. And this fear, it wasn't just theoretical. Rulers and churches saw their authority being challenged directly. You had people like Minacchio, an Italian miller, who read books, developed his own unique interpretations of the Bible, and was ultimately executed for heresy. In response, the Catholic Church created the Index of Prohibited Books, which was a massive list of publications that were banned for their content.
It was a desperate attempt to put the genie back in the bottle.
But of course, it was too late. The genie was out, and it was creating something entirely new, a mass reading public. For the first time ever, reading was becoming an activity for the many, not just for the few.
As the cost of books just plummeted, a true reading mania took hold. In England, you had these little penny chapbooks, small, cheap pamphlets sold by traveling peddlers. In France, you had the Bibliothèque Bleue, or Blue Library, which was full of low-cost books. And we're not talking about high philosophy here. This was stuff like almanacs, folk tales, and romances, but it brought millions of new readers into the fold.
This created a brand new public sphere. People were reading the same things, talking about the same ideas, and forming a collective public opinion. The writings of Enlightenment thinkers like Voltaire and Rousseau, who were really critical of tradition and absolute monarchy, were now being widely read and debated. This created the intellectual spark for huge events like the French Revolution. Now, the story of print, of course, wasn't just confined to Europe. This revolutionary technology spread all across the globe, and in each new place, it was adopted and transformed in really fascinating ways. Let's take a look at its arrival in India.
So if we trace the path, we see the technology moves from East Asia to Europe, and then, in the mid-16th century, the very first press arrives in Goa, brought over by Portuguese missionaries. This moment marked the beginning of a whole new chapter in India's long, rich history of knowledge.
And just like in Europe, India had its own amazing tradition of making knowledge, these beautiful, intricate, handwritten manuscripts. But print introduced completely new forms of expression. Suddenly you had political cartoons, critiques of colonial rule, and public debates being circulated widely, creating all new kinds of public conversation.
Print became a really powerful tool and a battleground for ideas. Religious reformers and traditional Orthodox groups used cheap presses to passionately argue their positions. Social reformers used print to campaign against practices like widow immolation. And, crucially, newspapers began connecting people across the vast subcontinent, helping to forge a shared pan-Indian identity and really giving birth to a national consciousness.
And for so many people, especially women, print opened up a world that had been totally closed to them. Just think about the story of Rush Sundari Devi. She was a young girl in a very orthodox household, and she was forbidden from learning. So what did she do? She taught herself to read in secret in her kitchen, and she went on to write the first full-length autobiography in the Bengali language. Her story and the feeling in this quote from a 19th century novel, they just capture how for millions of people, especially women, books were a source of real liberation and happiness.
So, from religious reform to political revolution, print culture fundamentally shaped the world we live in today. It completely changed our relationship with knowledge, with power, and with each other. And that leaves us with a final thought. As we live through our own information revolution, one that's fueled by screens and servers instead of paper and ink, what kind of world are we building now?